strange, it's not. Sometimes it doesn't pull up. I think I have too many windows open. Sometimes it struggles pulling up trading view in here, but I think, can you guys let me know if you can see the screen? I think it's kind of lagging a little tiny bit. Okay, I need to show you guys something real quick before things start moving a little bit. And I probably should have picked a different color than white. There's the highest odds around the 1 o'clock period today, specifically around mid-session between 12:42, 106, 112. I would for sure document that. Let me just change the color of these though, hold on. And that's why I was saying you could take some off here at 70.81 if you wanted, because I would expect a reaction like that there, especially because one, it's still super early. They definitely don't have to bring it to this area at that point in the day. Okay. Two, this was the time of day I had for some clearance breaks, so like around 11:01. I don't know if you guys can see this. This 11:04 through 11:15. These are essentially like the mid frames here. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. There's a few ways of looking at this too. Like they hit lows close to like just after open this morning. Remember yesterday I said market was moving in roughly like 18-19 minute intervals. It's kind of doing the same thing today, maybe not exactly as much, but I figured that being said, we likely have some odds. These are basically points in the day that are linked to highs and are calculated spots, so I figured probably close to like an 83.5 minute interval. Okay, do you guys see this? It's roughly 83.5 points. Okay, so there were some calculated times right around here based on this 1241 stick. If you want to measure ahead of that, that would be like the 1240. And then we always watch the 1230 to 1236 window anyway, since that is mid-session. But I found it very interesting that the alignment here off lows is directly linked to these points in the day. So 165 minutes, half that interval is 82.5 minutes. Okay, so they did do this just a little early, but do you see what I'm saying, you guys? So these were calculated times here. Calculated times of day for 7081 test. If I extend this just a tiny bit for the extended periods that I have around 106, 112, this is where we could see an extension. Just give me a second because so that'd be like 95.5 minutes, give or take. Like this is probably between 95 and 95 and roughly like 98, 99. So like 95.5 or 90. Did I say 95.5? I think so. It should be around the 1130, 1131. 98.5 is going to be roughly around here. How many points is that? 197. It's 90. Yeah, 98.5. Okay, so that being said, there's definitely some odds that open up here around this 1130 to 1134 windows. If they can start clearing, and a pattern I noticed is, you see here how they did this a few minutes early, okay, like in comparison to here. Okay, they could try doing the same thing again, and they were doing the same thing yesterday where they were tracking like 2 to 4 minutes ahead. So I would say like probably a 3 to 4 minute window. So that means they could maybe start breaking or clearing as early as here. Okay, so like 1226, 1227. but this is the most probable period here. These are ahead of mid-session. Oh, thanks for subscribing, Ty. Hold on, I don't even have my Twitch opened. Where's my Twitch? Don't even have a screen open, I don't think. Can you guys make sure you're also tuned in on Twitch? Because view count has been super low since I started streaming again. I need it back over the 50 to 75 mark, which has been pretty hard recently. So if you're gonna tune in on Discord, that's fine, but at least have the video up there so it at least goes towards the view count. Otherwise, I could lose the monetization on there too. Using Discord does absolutely nothing for me. It's just sometimes people say that they could hear better on there. I'm just using Discord so that the bot transcribes the session, so that way it at least records the session. Does that make sense? Like from a note perspective versus a video perspective, because sometimes it's very hard for me to transcribe a video, but then this way at least people have odds of doing that. So let's see if they get some retest here. These are some pretty big spots for us. Let me change these. Let's make these a little bit higher for today's session. When I was analyzing yesterday, I did notice that there was quite a bit of overhead. I don't have them marked, but like around 70, 91 to 92, 93 areas. So I wonder if they clear into the zone today, if they might just have a bit of choppier price action. And one of the biggest leading indicators that might be the case is what? What do you guys think? I already know that could happen, and based on one thing and one thing only. What do you guys think? What's that one factor that could imply that that's the kind of PA that we could see if they end up getting into this area here? What is it? No? Today's open was a decent open. It was 70.71.50. Which again is not, that's still a core open. Or 70, yeah, it was 70.71. Not the open. Think about dynamics of this trade. And this is probably, remember how we said we had those 17-point reductions? That's right off the zone entry at 70.88. That's worth noting. No, it has nothing to do with where they broke overnight, like, and not getting there. Yes, obviously that can play a factor into like getting stuck a bit there in real time today, because we haven't even engaged with 8.1, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.8. Does that make sense? So yes, you're right about that, Eddie, because that means that they might have to end up consolidating this area a little bit first. Does that make sense? Like this area here might have to have some sort of form of consolidation, specifically like probably above the 7, 6, 7, and 8 area, like this range in here. Okay, they might have to consolidate, but what else? There's a huge factor that is weighing in right here. What is it? What's that factor that's playing a pretty big role in whether or not that we could see some sticky price action there before potentially extending to 7,103, 7,108, 7,110. So we already know that this area is a pretty big spot, like the 7,100s. But what could allow for stickier price action potentially? Aside from price digestion that would be healthier to occur. So we do So that's one right answer that Eddie was saying. So price digestion in areas we have yet to discover. 70, 78, 70, 81, 70, 80. I'll just say 70, 85. Okay, what's 2? The window is coming up here, so if they start delaying, then we'll have an even better idea on what and how they can end up trading this today. There's some slight reduction sticks here too. They're still trying to hold over the open. This is the more ideal window, I would say, of getting these retest and reclaims over 8-1. If they can't, then we still have a lot of time. Come on, you guys, someone try answering that. It's actually a very easy answer. They use logic. And specifically, like, off the kind of price action that you're seeing occur. Look at the volatility coming in here ahead of that 11, 30, 31 window. There's definitely some range reduction that's occurring, which I think is normal considering something that you guys are not answering. I need to show you guys something real quick. Do you see what they just did here? This is a perfect example of range reduction, okay? Because they knew that we had some odds coming up here, they reduced the range down. Because otherwise, you see how they could have shot it up to 8-4? This is a very, very, very good example, you guys, of exact timing and range reductions occurring, okay? Because the times of clearing were as early as 11:30, 11:31, so that's actually pretty impressive. I don't even know how to reword the question anymore. The question is, what could be the big factor as to, even if they get over 70.81 and 70.84, why could they potentially stall 70.91, 92.93, and maybe have sticky price action there, even though our targets are closer to 71.03, 71.08, 71.10? Why could that potentially be the case? And it doesn't necessarily just have to be for today's session, but in general. Why could that potentially be the case? And you know what's funny? Every time I ask about these sorts of questions, no one ever gets them right, and it blows my mind because my biggest factor in trading is time, and no one ever gets these questions right. No one ever gets these questions right until I ask it probably 10 times, okay? Time, okay? So we have a lot of time, okay? This is, our higher odds are around this window, and I already told you guys, 12:41, 1:06, 1:12 p.m., okay? So is breaking 70, 81, 70, 84 at as early as 11:30, 11:38, is it really required? Probably not, okay? Because we have until this period here to do so. Whereas clearing here at as early as these times of day, give us some better odds of at least still getting to our ranges. Because if they end up delaying this, and we're just kind of now digesting the core ranges, and then they don't push until this point in time, okay, then there's higher odds that they'll likely stall here first. Okay, does that make sense? Whereas if they push as early as this point, they could potentially get there and then maybe spend this period of time digesting the 7.6, 7.8, 8.1, 8.4. Does that make sense, you guys? Which could have us set up a little bit better for getting these breaks at those points in the day. And that's what could maybe keep the 71.20s or whatever in play. Anyway, you guys have to start factoring in market dynamics a lot more than you guys do. Okay, the market's not just about trading a specific price point. It's trying to understand just how much range you could see on the session and how, okay, and how it could potentially play out. Like, creating mocks, honestly, It's a very important skill to have when you're trading. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand why price is trading in that direction. Does that make sense? Or why a certain area could be heavy. And then it's also like that 17-point reduction off open. Well, the same sort of thing could apply on NQ. I just haven't updated my NQ template in a while. But do you guys see the reduction during this period here? Why do you think that they reduced this here? Why do you think they would have reduced this here? I'll update my NQ template tonight so I can start sharing it again if it makes it easier for you guys. Why do you guys think that is? So these were like about half the range in time. So they're not necessarily like this is where you have like a 50% window, okay? I would say at least we met 7081, okay? So that still could classify as essentially hitting those ranges. Once we start hitting closer to these intervals here, like 1222, 1221, these are 75% of the time intervals, okay? So there's some odds that they could just push that instead. And they're doing what we talked about earlier, where they could have like those 3 to 4 minute extensions. So this was the cutoff. I would say it's probably at least important to get back over like 7.4, 7.6. 147-ish minutes is probably the range in time for like, or not 170, sorry, 140, yeah, 147 versus like 191, like 143. And then off 1242, because these were the earlier windows, is closer to the one, this mark here. So just right at 12 actually. Okay. And we want to see if we have that 4-minute window here that we were talking about, because they did this 4 minutes early. So they could push this 4 minutes. There's a 3 to 4 minute window. Can you guys document this? They're doing the same thing that they did before. They're just doing it a little bit after. So back in here, we had higher odds closer to this window, and then they ended up breaking 4 minutes early. So I figured if they don't clear during this point in time, they could end up clearing 4 minutes late right here. Okay, so we could kind of monitor this window right here, so close to 1136, 1138, 1137. I mean, that's good to hear, but so President Joseph Joseph Aoun. A phone call took place this afternoon between U.S. President Donald Trump and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun. During the call, President Aoun renewed his thanks for the efforts Trump is exerting to reach a ceasefire in Lebanon and secure lasting peace and stability, paving the way for achieving. Oh, I'm sure. Did they test 70, 84, 85 during this period, you guys? So this period's more about testing these ranges than it is clearing them because, like I was saying before, it's still pretty early. But whereas if we don't even test them around these points in the day, and we wait until noon, then that's where it's going to get very, very hard for us to get progressive price action because we had yet to even test that. Does that make sense? So it's like if we just kind of had stayed like this, okay, then and that continues to drag on, then it's going to make it a lot harder to clear. Yeah, like peace in the region after you just killed like 2,500 people. Like, get the hell out of here. And like displaced like 1.1 million people, and people are sleeping on the streets. Like, shut the. I can't swear on here. But honestly, our government is even worse. But everyone knows how the world works. So. Money makes the world go round, unfortunately. The like Israel just announced yesterday that they're not gonna cease fire in Lebanon anytime soon. So like those remarks, they just put them out just to put them out. I swear they just put them out to meet price or something. That's it. That's not actually going to happen. And have you guys seen any of the disclaimers of like what they are going to do when they sign these agreements? Okay, that's the first thing they're going to do. Second, okay, and then there was a third condition that was insane. So it's basically signing these treaties is just giving them a way of controlling the whole country, essentially. Is what they are going to do. And I don't blame a lot of Lebanese for wanting to have these things signed because they're kind of just helpless at that point, that like that's really the only option they have. But I'm sorry, the US and Israel are not the countries that are going to save Lebanon. Like, get the hell out of here. There has to be some sort of like outside interference that is not Canada, the States, or the US or like Israel or any of those countries. Or France, before people start jumping to the France conclusion. There has to be another sort of middleman. I don't know who, but clearly it can't be the Lebanese government because they don't even have money. Or they're just sellouts. Which country do you think would be the better option for them to have like intervention? Because I don't even know. There has to be something. Because as much as people want to pretend that Israel and the States have the best intentions, for Lebanon they definitely don't. And you'd be absolutely insane to believe they did after just massacring like they literally dropped 200 bombs in the span of 10 minutes. Do you know how insane that is? In the capital city, that's crazy. And then claim peace a week later, that's wild. I feel like maybe an Asian intervention would be the best bet. Yeah, exactly, but it's literally not even like they're like a puppet of their own nation, but it's all these tactics that they use. It's just too complex for the like general public to understand it, because if you don't understand how religion and stuff in the region works, then it's a very complex thing to kind of put the two and two together. Do you know what I mean? But that they always use that tactic. And now they're doing it as like they're seeking revenge because of the Assad collapse, and during his time in Syria when they were slaughtering Sunni Muslims, right? They'll just, and now the whole thing is just bullshit. Like, it's just very hard to like, I don't know. I guess if you're not Lebanese though, you probably wouldn't really understand it. Yeah, and then they'll go bomb a church. But the thing is like a lot of Lebanese families, like, it's not that they think like that. They don't actually believe these things because they're clearly the ones living there. And I'm sorry, like, Christians are not being like prosecuted or something against in Lebanon. Like, okay. But the issue is a lot of Lebanese just don't want, they just obviously want peace, so there's no other way of, they don't have any other options. Like, what options do they even have? So I don't blame Lebanese for also, I guess, wanting to sign these things, right? Oh, my parents are too, trust me. I got into a huge fight with half of my family the other day. It was like a 4 hour argument to the point that my brother-in-law left. Then he called me the next day asking if I was upset with him. I was like, no. And he's like, I need you to be my, what do you call that? Like like someone that delegates or like for a passport or whatever. And I was like, what? So you can go to Israel? And then he got mad. This is kind of the waiting period, guys. So I think our conditions are met. We did tag 8-1 and 8-4, so that's good. We want to utilize this period. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's not about the killing people part. It's about, I guess, like the complexity of like Lebanese politics, and like there's just too many different opposing opinions. Do you know what I'm saying? But generally, the entire population all obviously wants the same thing. Well, at least I would hope they want the same thing, which is Lebanon first before anything, right? But they don't have the funding for that. Like, they don't have like the how could they achieve that if every single person that runs for president or prime minister gets assassinated and then no one gets any accountability? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, how are they even going to properly operate a country? And no military funding or anything like that. Well, thank you for being here. My X account though is for trading. It's just I somehow hit the Lebanese algorithm. So I don't know. And then I got hacked after posting some opinions. I got my account back today, you guys. Which required me getting like 2 hours of sleep. The entire country is corrupt. If you think about it though. And that's where I got into a huge argument with my dad. Because I don't know what my dad was saying. I forget exactly what he said. And like the reason why they left Lebanon after 1989 or 88 or whatever. Because he fought in the war. And then, I don't know what he said. Something along the lines of, oh, my brother called him out saying like, didn't you say you left because the government was literally stealing from their people? And he's like, no, that's not why we left. It's crazy how they're so quick to defend the same government that let them down. I don't understand it. And everyone knows the same two tactics that majority of Lebanese families come to. And they'll always come to those two tactics before coming to the last one. If you put the two and two together, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you, Alexis. It was so hard to get it back. But 6 days apparently is an impressive turnaround time. So I must have been doing something right. Yeah. Mine is always when they say, well, if it wasn't for this, then whatever, and this is whatever, this country is operating inside our country. And then if you go back and say, well, if Israel didn't, invade Lebanon, then they say, well, it was because of the Palestinians. And then they'll go back and forth, back and forth. Like, why were the Palestinians there in the first place? And then they'll get mad if you call them a Zionist. This is like a constant conversation in my household every single day. But yeah, I guess we can't blame like it's always Palestinians, Hezbollah, Syrians. I don't know if I can even say those things on here. Before Israel. It's always those three before Israel. It's always those three before Israel. That's the thing I never understand. Like, why is it always those three things before Israel? Always. Why? Like, and that means that their plan worked, because they basically just got all those communities against each other. Which, I'm sorry, are the exact same people. You can't convince me that a Lebanese and a Syrian and a Palestinian are literally not the exact same people. They're literally the exact same people. They look exactly the same. Like, they're the exact same people. They did, within our own communities. That's crazy. Or so they claim. We gotta eradicate the Muslim terrorists. Muslim, not Muslim. Muslim terrorists. Yeah, that's true. Oh, but Eddie, this is how Lebanese people think. This is how my parents think. That's how they actually think. Like, I swear. It's crazy. That's how my parents think. It's such a weird thing. I don't know how to. It's a very complex thing to explain. And then when you come back to it, then they'll be like, yeah, this and this to. I don't want to. I don't want to get banned on here, so I can't really say too much. But it's a really weird way of thinking. All right, these were some of the periods that were coming up that were linked to 75% of the time intervals in here. So let me just mark these so I don't forget. NVTS, I have not looked at that. This one came back to these ranges in here. I don't know if you guys, someone was mentioning it earlier this morning. And Tesla is kind of just stuck in the ranges down here, but it ended up triggering our spots that we had, like the 396 and 398. They stalled right around that 398 range, but notice where they gapped this morning, you guys. And I noticed that the differentials off this morning's open and then the lows are pretty similar on Tesla. So what I mean by that is kind of like back in here. Okay, like the morning open. Versus like the calculated ranges. I never fully measured the actual session open against here, but I feel like we could. Well, I lost my Tesla template, which honestly makes me so sad, but okay, do you see what I'm saying? Do you guys see that? So there's some pretty good odds that they could recycle the same range down in comparison. I think that we have like a max, like 2.81 is likely the most probable, and you can kind of see how they held around 381, 382. But I do think that they could have potentially afforded like the full I don't know if you see this, kind of like where they started basing their lows in here. Do you see that? And specifically like off like the 387, 389. I just feel like these are probably max downside scenarios here. I wouldn't have really wanted this to get anywhere lower than like 380 though. So 382 hold isn't bad. I do think though that they have to get back over this 390.76 and try getting to that 392, which honestly if ES can get the push today it could, because they had a pretty good open. Like 397.20 is a good open. It was above that 396 mark, and this was the target range here in this area here around 398.80. All right, let's do a poll. Who here thinks ES clear 70.84 to 70.86 area by 75% time intervals? That would be basically now, so 11:59, 12 p.m. I'm not used to having X notifications turned on. I don't know how this even turned on. For some reason though it's... No, you guys, it is me. It's not a hacker. I'm still paranoid though because it won't let me add. I was gonna ask, or if you're Durzi. We don't really have a big Druze population where I live though. Like I only have one Druze friend here. And I don't think he even cares about Lebanese politics. I don't even think I've ever seen him mention anything about Lebanese politics, and I've known him since like the 3rd grade. I'd be curious to see what the majority of like Druze families think though. Like I feel like a Sunni family is pretty straightforward. Like they're 90% think the same. Yeah, you guys can't grow because you guys can't mix. There's a lot actually in Edmonton, in like the city 3 hours from me. There's a lot there from I forget the name. There's a lot from Rashaya too though, but that's not where they're from. There's a specific city that they're from. And apparently there's a lot in California too. Look at the 7085 break, guys, right at noon. Uh, yeah, same here. But that's kind of hard to come across nowadays. 7085 being taken out, guys, and 786 being tested is a very, very good thing, especially for right at 12. Okay, so I don't have everything marked on here because I'm trying to keep this as clean as possible, which you guys know is not going to happen. But 7086 is that's the top of our core areas. So that being tested at noon is a very, very good thing. And when I say clear by 11:59, it means that like they're closing above, breaking above that 8-4 spot, which is exactly what they did. Do you guys see that? Right here. So this makes it a lot easier to kind of at this point, if they want to reverse down and come back and back test, then that's still okay because these conditions were met, and they were met with still 25% of the time range left. Do you see how this would help us in terms of ideally not getting stuck in this area too long today, and giving us at least an odd of getting some extensions, because these areas are pretty tough. If you want to take some off in this area here, you could. If you would rather wait to see if they clear the zone and maybe closer to like the 12, 22, 12:30, 12:42 period during mid-session. Do we have any actual scheduled events at 1 today? I know there were some speakers from EU, but I didn't see anything else. Today's Thursday, right? I didn't see anything else. Can't believe it's already the 16th. Okay, so that's good. Sometimes having little to no catalyst is actually better because then there isn't anything that could prevent us from continuing. it's funny because people often think that you need some sort of catalyst or news to keep going, but it sometimes if your conditions are met, and especially if they're met on time, which in our case they are, because we hit and triggered 70, 81, 84, and specifically before this period here, then it kind of is like it relieves the tension of like us coming back or reversing back down, or kind of gives us like the path to continue without a catalyst being the factor of stalling us, if that makes sense. Did you guys cover anything here? Premiums are moving really, really good today. So it just depends on what contracts you guys did. I took some ES and some SPY. I saw some of you take SPX. SPX was really, really good today too, especially during these periods here. I missed that trade, but that would have been a really good SPX trade for those that were talking about it. But I just did the 700 strike. I just figured that that was pretty easy. And there is a bit of a cup and handle on these contracts too, guys. So this could also be another reason why, from like a premium structure basis, why they could potentially continue. Let me just share this. Let's take a look at SPX though, because remember how I was saying yesterday that SPX getting to the 70, 32, 22, 28, like overnight, SPX closed right into like the 70, 22, 23. So this was a core close. You can kind of see the open here. They opened above 70, 40. They did a really good job sustaining like the 70, 10. The channel on the SPX contract is usually linked with these neutral ranges. Okay, so this makes sense why they could start stalling in this range in here. I need to fix this though, hold on. This was the one I made in like the span of like 2 minutes. So you see how they're kind of stalling the top of the channel now on SPX. So think of SPX as like the top of the channel is the same thing as like entering a new zone on ES. Does that make sense? So if we're gonna look for, I was thinking these areas here today on ES, depending on how well they act this afternoon. That would be essentially the same thing as getting to, where's SPX? As getting to core areas or core ratios on SPX. These areas here. And that makes sense because this is a core close in the green box. That would be like a core to core move, okay? So but that's only going to be the case if they clear the channel. So one way of looking at this that makes a lot of sense is on ES we'd be like digesting the core ratios here that we haven't tested yet. Like this is obviously our first time hitting these spots. Whereas on SPX we'd be basically digesting in the channel. Okay, so what area tends to have the highest digestive consolidative price action? Generally speaking, which area tends to have that? And thank you so much. And I enjoy the talk too. What's your handle on X so I can make sure I follow you too? $90 points lower? That's a target. Well, I mean, for them to go lower, we talked about this yesterday. I'm just gonna be lazy and copy paste. I didn't put it in the chat or in the report, but because I didn't figure it was a high probability, and I had very good odds that we would hold 70.44, and that was pretty spot on. But I did say that in the event that we do end up coming back, and if we stall 70.81 and 70.84 and we fail to get into the zone above 70.88, there is a chance that they could recycle this back down. I'm copying and pasting from yesterday, and that would make it so that they end up making end of week, Friday, so tomorrow, pinnable. What that means is they kind of reset conditions from previous all-time highs that we couldn't meet prior. Does that make sense, you guys? Because in the past, one of the big issues that we came across was the fact that they couldn't clear the channel in here. Okay, they couldn't get above 4.8. They stalled our 2.7, 2.8 core ranges. These were all part of the bigger issue previously. Okay, so, and even though we never really had like this close right here, even though we hit 69.25 and clear to 70.04, we do have those 17-point reductions that I talked about in the report yesterday, which could be a reason why we eventually can have a bigger reversal, but not anytime soon based on what I was seeing because of the discrepancy here. But it's basically a reset because we never had the proper clearance breaks in the past back here, which I'm not going to get into because there's a lot of streams on that, but you can kind of see like the market was working like 346 point intervals roughly, which is exactly where they came back and cleared highs. Okay, do you see that? So excuse me. So the only way that that would be the case is if, let's say, they fail to get into a new zone and they end up coming back to reset conditions, like to actually form better structures this time around the 70.28, 70.32, 74. Does that make sense? To give like full odds of getting like bigger core breaks. But I figured that if they clear 70.80s, we could get 71.20s first before anything. And one of the big reasons why is the 2-day structure that we're currently in, and something else. What's one factor that would play a key role here based on the zone theory? What's the premises of the zone theory, I guess? Oops, not my phone trying to call the police. Let's see. Okay, Kevin or Nadia or Wayne or anyone that's tuning in. What's the main objective of the point theory? What is the point theory, just generally speaking? And this is pretty important because if you don't understand this basic concept, then you don't really understand like the foundation or the core aspect of like the theory that's created. What's the whole basis of this theory? Yeah, and that megaphone too, I've been seeing that, Brendan. That is what could create that downside, right? This is what could essentially in the future create the bigger reversal or leg down afterwards. We have our 12.18 and 12.20 windows coming up, and these were the odds of getting the 70.87, 70.88 break. So far, they're doing a really good job holding over 70.81, 70.84. Come on, you guys, just because you stay quiet doesn't mean I'm going to stop bugging you to answer that. What is the theory? What's it based on? No. The point theory is not based on price and time. That's how I trade. What's the point theory based on? It's based on something, an X number of something. What's the whole theory? What do I call it? If you guys don't know that, that's actually very bad. What is the theory based on? It's based on range, but what's the basis of the theory, Ashley? What do I call it? Okay, the range? What? How much range? What is the range? Hint, hint. Wow, you guys, that's very, 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 very bad that you guys actually don't know that. That is terrible, actually, okay? The 100-point theory, come on. That is the whole basis of the theory. It's the 100-point theory. Wow, that is terrible that none of you guys got that. 2 years later, 3 years later, that is insane. That is insane, okay? Yes, it's based on the 100-point theory, okay? So, what accounts for you to push another 100 points? What do you have to typically do to get another 100 points in range? What is it that you have to achieve, which we're doing right now, by the way? FYI. What do you have to do to technically usually get into that next 100-point range? What do you have to do? I gave you guys the answers, so you guys can't get that wrong. We're doing it right now. What do you have to do to typically continue, or getting, I guess, into the net? You have to break into a new zone, okay? So 7088 in this case, okay? Can 7088 get us another 100 points? Yes, it can. So this could technically push us to 7188, okay? Everyone is on the same page. When we don't stall, which was the theme, is we don't want to stall. Okay. Did we want to stall these 3-4 days? What did I say we're gonna have happen? And you guys kept saying, like, I kept reading, like, oh, I hope we pull back. I hope, like, no, that, okay, yes, maybe to an area like 70, 44, 48, 52, but not if you meet conditions. Like, if we had met conditions overnight, would we, like, if we had hit 81, 84 overnight, do you honestly think they would have pushed this back down to 48 in real time today? The theme for this week is continuation. They have to just keep going up. There was no in between. And I mentioned that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Okay, it's just continuation odds. That's what happens. That's how the current market dynamics are, right? So expansions, yeah, exactly, into like smaller pullbacks. Until maybe when? And especially because this is like a core-to-core continuation. Until potentially we start hitting like a 6th or 7th bar, right? Like, there's a lot of notes in here. I didn't summarize yesterday's notes, but this is basically 4th bar continuation. Multi-flips usually can give continuation. And extensions, okay? So and we had said yesterday, if they give us zone entries, I by the 16th. I mentioned this yesterday. What does this mean? Because they're doing it right now. There's a 7088 break, guys, right on time. Can someone document that? 1218 getting a 7088 break. That's perfect timing, okay, for time and price, you guys. Our plan today is going extremely well. These were the odds for zone entries here. These were the 75% time interval odds for 70, 84, 85 breaks. This is the period that we want to start testing here around 70, 88, 70, 90, 91, 92 to give us the highest odds of getting what today? I'm just marking these, even though we already talked about them. But that way you guys know what these were, okay? This window here. Oops. Let me just delete that. No one's gonna show you how to trade like this, okay? So you have to start setting conditions. I've been setting them for the last hour and a half. So our conditions back in here were to test 8-1. Our conditions in here, this was the earliest. It wasn't really, it didn't have to happen, but if it did, it would give us better odds if they would have tested 8-4. Okay, 8-4 tested here, consolidated. Then they pushed it right on time, okay? Then they held 8-1, 8-4. Then they pushed 70, 88. So you guys have to now make the conditions for our most calculated periods today between 12:30, 12:36, 12:40, 12:41, 42, 106, and 112. Give me the conditions. I already gave you guys the conditions since I turned on the mic. So, and I gave you guys the times. So you guys can give me the conditions for the most important periods. Remember when we looked at this earlier too? And we had mentioned that if they clear on time, then the odds of stalling are heavily reduced. Okay, so what would some conditions be for these periods here? This is a good spot to take some off, you guys, I would say. Especially ahead of mid-session. 7088 is a huge area for us today. That meets the condition for the 16th, which was entering the zone or tagging the zone at 7088. And I also figured that we could probably come into quite a bit of overhead in this range. And specifically if they take us here before 1242, 106, 107, 112, because this is where we could, like I drew earlier, if they push 8-1, 8-4, okay, 8-8. Remember how we were drawing this? They could technically digest this area first a little bit before seeing those extensions. So it's a very, very big spot. Let me know. These are reduction sticks, by the way. Let me know what you guys think the conditions should be. Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. So volatility could definitely trigger here too, because this is technically enough to be considered max ranges for the session today if they wanted to. Obviously it's still before mid-session, so there's still quite a lot of time, but you get what I'm saying. That was my first cover, you guys, off the 70-88 test, because those were very calculated points in time here. Test 9-6. Yeah, I think so. What about by 12? What about by the 12:37, 12:42 window? That's a very important window coming up here. So, what do you guys think? Do you guys see the reduction that occurred during this period? This is very important because this kind of gives us an idea of the areas that could, one, become overheads, okay? And two, what they could have done during this time interval here. So I would say that they likely might have had some odds closer to the 70, 97, 70, 96, 98 range, okay? Yeah, I don't think so either. They don't have to be either. But do you see the clear reduction during this period here? Like, I think this was pretty obvious, especially the fact that they brought it, if you pay attention to this 1222 stick, okay, and 1221. They brought it back to 8-4 and 8-1. Do you guys think that that's a coincidence that they did that at this point in time? What do you guys think? Nope, obviously, no, it's not, right? Those were calculated times, those are calculated price points. Does that keep this play valid? Yes, it does, okay? So that's a very important detail to kind of pay attention to. But with the condition that they retrace, I would say probably by the 1229, 1230 mark. Like back over 8.4, 8.5. To at least reduce the volatility just a tiny bit. And then I would say that the conditions for this period here, especially like 1236, 1240, 1242. What do you guys think? Because it's quite a lot of time from now until 106, 112. What do you think they'd have to do from these calculated intervals here around like the 1222, 1223 periods to this interval here, let's say for 1230, 1236? What do you guys think they'd have to do here? And this is where it becomes very important that you guys start understanding conditions, because that's how you capture like the full trade. Does that make sense? And also where you get a lot better at understanding like your max risk reward scenarios. So 70-88 condition was met for 1218. There was clearly no push within this period to 70, 91, 92. That there was reductions, which are very, very clear. Okay. They held 8-1, 8-4. They did breach 8-1 slightly, but closed above. Okay. So what conditions have to be met here? As early as 1230, ideally by this interval in time here, because this is a very, very, very important time range. These are linked to highs. Yes, make high or low structure, but there's something else that has to occur. Because making higher lows is one thing, but you also probably have to do something else. Otherwise, the risk starts to increase, especially since these are the most calculated periods for the session today, which are going to determine our range, okay? So stalling at these points in time, it's also relative to how much range we're going to get on the actual whole session today, okay? Which is very important. So what do you guys think? $12.30 retesting that 781 spot here. I want to remove this so you guys can see, like, it's trying to fight off volatility. This is definitely a point where, like, if they start breaking structure a little bit, where volatility could increase, especially since we have this period coming up here. Do you see that increase in volatility? These again would account for range reductions on the session, so I can already tell that this was a 9.7. This is probably close to like 71.01, 71.02, 03, just based on the reductions that I'm seeing. Okay, so they could, right? Because remember, we're hitting a area of like max range for the week soon. Which either way, this is still a really good trade from like the way it traded, but did you guys cover some at the 70-80 test? That was a huge area to cover, at least something. I would say at least 50%, because if they end up breaking up range in a period of 2 days, that could very much be like max range scenarios. Okay. But for me personally, that was a pretty big spot for covers, especially when I didn't see the continuation, that follow through. Like, you see that immediate rejection stick here and then here? That kind of hinted that they're likely going to stall range or start giving us like those max reduction scenarios, basically, okay? Which isn't the worst case, but it does change the dynamics just a tiny bit. So volatility could definitely start increasing. You could also take some short positions off those areas too. Look at the stick in the range, you guys, at 1234. That's insane. That has to be news on that stick. And that's exactly why it's so important to make sure that you de-risk, especially at major areas of confluence, okay? And that being said, obviously, off of these ranges here. Yeah, but that was a very obvious thing that they could do. This is what I was talking about. Because they have so much time until 1240, 42, 107, 106. Usually when they end up giving that much in reduction, it implies that they likely want to start recycling range. That's a total of 25 to 26 points, which is quite a lot, and especially ahead of the, and remember how I said earlier, like these were our potential targets for the session today, or what had the highest odds if they were going to potentially keep pushing. I mentioned it this morning. So what, in doing what they did there, it's basically reducing those odds of getting, you know, like extended ranges, if that makes sense. But what could work in our favor here? This could actually be a pretty good dip in terms of time, based on how much time we have here. Obviously, I would be a little bit cautious. Like, I preferred where we entered, but for those that like a higher risk reward type of trade, what could work in the market's favor here? Timing. We have our window hasn't even happened yet. Our 1237 to 1242, 106 to 112 windows. Those are the most important times of day. Does that make sense? I think these are likely the midpoints here. I didn't measure these, like the 12, 33, 36. Like normally we watch these periods anyway, but Okay, guys, we have very important time periods coming up here. These are crucial for highs, and they're actually the mid-session, which is crazy confluence for today. That being said, what conditions do you guys think has to be met at these points in time, especially based on what occurred at 12:33? Like, had this not occurred at 12:33, then we likely would have seen the range back up, maybe testing these ranges, right? Or we could have seen, you know, 12.75 points back up here to like 9.1. So considering that we had that stick down, what conditions have to be met, you think, during this period here, specifically around that 12:42 window? And this is crucial. What do you think the condition would have to be? I would say without the stick down back here, then yes, for sure, I would have preferred to get back over 70.88. But based on the stick down and the reduction in range, what conditions have to be met at 12:40, 12:42 to keep this in play for a duration of end of session today? Because this is linked to end of session, or at least through 106, 112. What conditions have to be met? Yeah, I would say minimum 8.1 retest, like around here. Ideally back to 8.4, but like at least the 8.1 retest. Like if they can't even get this back over 8.1, then we're probably in some trouble this afternoon, or this would probably end up becoming a very digestive type of session. So we'll see. We're gonna watch the 12:45. 12:48 windows. I know that they're not the calculated times today, but those are generic times for the session, for mid-session. So far they're reducing range at 12:41. That's definitely not the kind of price action you want to see ahead of that 12:41 period, because that's going to make it a lot harder for them to get this back over 4.1, 4.2. Thanks, Brendan, for adding the commentary in here too. Do you see what they did off this candle here, guys? Like, this is a good example of them basically reducing range. Like, this is where they could have taken it back over the 8.1, 8.2, likely over 8.4 by this period had they actually pushed. Do you see what I'm saying? These areas are definitely linked to 8.4, 8.5, and the 8.1. This is the window, by the way. It's this window here. So the next follow-through sticks, I think, they're pretty important to see how this reacts in these ranges in here, because this is what's going to likely determine the remainder of the session today. There still was the window at 106, 112, but I think them even stalling this area here could end up turning it into, and remember that SPX is basically back in the channel. Like, and whenever you get crossover between a zone, means, channel like this, then usually that can entail for kind of like sideways type of price action. Where exactly did they stall right here? 79.50. I could tell that the volatility was going to increase too based off the very first clue, which was, you see here at 12:23 when they breached 8.1. Okay, even though they closed above, that was the first sign that they were going to increase volatility here. And then when they couldn't get back over 8.4. So this was very, very clear. Like, our spots are actually insanely accurate, you guys. And another thing that they did here is, even though they took it beneath 6.566, we wanted to ideally hold 7.1. They did bring it back to 7.1, which is the core range, and actually today's opening range too, right? That's where they opened today's session. This is playing with fire now though, because now you're kind of battling between the means and the zone. So on SPX, they're kind of taking it just above the channel and just back in between to these core ranges, which on ES 70, 27, 28 was crucial. So same sort of idea. Do you see what I'm saying? Them breaching here isn't good, but maybe one reason why they could afford that is because at least they brought it back over 7.1 immediately. Okay, and whether you want to look at that as being the opening range or basically core ranges. Another thing is that they took it above that 8.788 by roughly the same sort of range. So technically speaking, the risk is balanced. Does that make sense, you guys? Like, they're kind of like, this is a very balanced risk reward on each end. 2 points above, 2 points below, 2 points stalled. Okay. And usually when you start seeing pay like this, and something I like to call like when things go like between multiple areas, like zone, channel, means bound, which on SPX that's what's happening, or means core zone bound, that creates volatility. What could bear flag? The 9-minute? What time did that flip? 12:18. 12:19 was highs, right? Like right after our 12:18 flip. Yeah, we could even watch like the 18-minute. This was linked to 12:36 and it's linked to 12:54. And mainly because 12:36 was the period that they retraced back over 7.1. We could also watch, let's see. You could watch maybe a 7-minute, 21-minute, let's see. Because these are based off that 12:33. So also linked to 12:54. Could you document that, Brendan? 12:54. And I also, and you can kind of see this doesn't look that good because this is obviously a nasty star reversal that could extend. I also would probably want to see, so the 7-minute is also linked to the 12:19 highs. Okay, we could probably use that time frame just on a shorter basis here, okay, which is linked to 12:54 and 101. So it kind of has some overlap between our windows. It's not really like a clean structure or anything like that, but the timing aspect of it is what I'm talking about. So 12:54 is likely the period where this has to try its best to negate. Otherwise, this could be a much bigger risk. And by negate, I mean at least get back over 8.1, because that's a lot of time from now until 106, 112 for this to stall and backtest basically. So if this is 12:54, then we'd have to watch 12:53 because that would be the closing stick for that time frame. linked to being, I think that's also linked to being the mid frame, if I'm not mistaken, between, let me see, because we have this period here, right? So is that the mid frame? I think so. These were kind of like the mid bars off highs in here. So 20, 53, 26 and a half. Six and a half would be 1259, and half of this is like roughly 23 and a half minutes, so we can go with like the 24. So from a calculated extension, there's a tiny extension at the 12:56, 57, 58 window, but based off these increments and based off like the 106, 112, okay. I just want to see if this aligns with that too. Oh, this is like after one. So far, PA is still pretty weak. Well, if they end up stalling, then I probably will end the stream early today. And then maybe look to check back like the last hour. So I don't see the point in streaming for a full 4 to 6 hours if they're gonna basically recycle down. And then I'll probably just manage positions. And you can already see the volatility coming in here. But they're doing the same thing they did right here before 12:53.54 that they did back here at 12:41. Do you see the same theme here? Look. That's another reduction stick, which makes it harder each time to get back over 7881. So, and they keep doing this, and they keep doing it consistently before these time intervals here, okay? I was planning on shutting off the stream around like 112, 115. 115 is the mid session for the actual session, but these were the calculated times at 112, 106. I want to see if SPX was kind of hitting close to re-entering back into the zone here, and it is. So 70.32 would be a zone break. Same thing as like the 70 71 open or 70, 68, 69 failure, which is basically like the core failures here. It's the same thing as re-entering the zone on SPX. So very important spots to pay attention to, especially around this like 1253, 54. I did note the 1256, 57, 58 calculated intervals based off this 1233 and our 106, 107 intervals. So that I wonder if that opens up a tiny probability for them to try to sustain before one, but I'd say overall risk for the session has definitely increased. But at least we caught like a pretty smooth sailing long trade off 70, 48, 51 all the way to our 70, 81, 84, 88 price targets. This is the area that I figured could be the heaviest. We also even timed it properly too here. And the reduction was very obvious between 1218 and 1223. This kind of just set the tone though. Like the 1233 reduction, I think that fully set the tone. And especially when they brought it beneath 7081 at our 1230.2. Overall, it's a really calculated session. What do you guys think? You think that they have odds of getting this back? Or not even getting it back, just at least like sustaining here at 1256, 57, trying to mitigate the risk just a tiny, tiny bit to keep odds delayed until after one, like closer to 106, 107 for a 7081 retest? Or do you think that the bulls are essentially going to fully give this up and take us back down to retest 7044, 7049 and make this recyclable into the end of week, into the zone areas, basically back to previous all-time highs? What do you guys think has the highest probability? Or do you think that they have some odds of getting it back, but maybe making range a little bit more consolidated? This would have to be the case if that was the idea here. Okay, like probably ideally by this point in time. What do you guys think has the higher probabilities? They've kind of been doing crossovers, which usually tend to lead to volatility. Crossovers means like when they enter one spot, so here they enter the zone, and then they also breach the means. On SPX, they entered the means and then breached the channel. I think so too. You can even tell just by the way that this is starting to trade. I'm just going to use the washroom real quick, guys, before the 1 o'clock period. I'll leave the stream on though. I'm just going to mute myself. You guys can hear me right now? I was saying, like, there's only 3 scenarios possibly that could happen. Like, either they double bottom quickly, they take this back to the calculated ranges of 50s, which were calculated for yesterday and open close from yesterday, or they fully reverse this back, which kind of does that recycling scenario that I talked about for tomorrow. But I do think that the 12:30 window from here basically set the market's fate for today, in the sense that they reduced the range. I think anyway, like I feel like it would be very hard to recover, to get the extended ranges from here personally. Like I could be wrong obviously, but that's just how I see this. I think if they had wanted to continue, they definitely wouldn't have done that stick right there. So they're likely keeping this in a more pinnable state. Whether or not we get a full extended short though is going to be based on what they do during this window here at 106 through 112, and essentially, like I said, like retesting yesterday's open close ranges, which are calculated off the report. Go back and read those if you want. Another scenario, which I think honestly this is pretty probable, is to keep this a doji for the session today, which honestly is a very high probability too, especially since this is in the 5th bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This flips over Monday. So if they want to kind of, 5th bars are not usually big range bars generally speaking, so that it could just end up dojiing the session today. Like a doji on the session is exactly what this looks like. And this is technically a 4th bar on the daily from the inside range breaks. Daily doji. Okay. Does that make sense? So we'll see here. Like if we really monitor these price points and these times, then we'll have an idea of like exactly what they want to do. So 106 clearly tested 7064. It hasn't come back to these ranges yet. This is the window. And then 115 is mid-session every day, so. What do you guys think have some of the higher odds? Oh God, how do I mute this conversation? I hate getting tagged and stuff like this sometimes. Mute this conversation. I'll set that for 5 minutes so you guys can vote. What do you guys think? There really are only the few possible scenarios that could happen, in my opinion. So, and I'll draw them out for you guys. Make sure you guys vote. So the 3 scenarios I think are, one, they could try sustaining here and then trying to push it back. This could, I don't really think this expands range for the session today, but it at least reduces some of the risk. Second scenario, they take out these ranges, which I don't really think this is like a fully bearish scenario, but could just kind of keep us channel to zone bound, basically back to highs, like previous all-time highs. Worst scenario would be that they fail these ranges here, but take us all the way back to the zone. I think if they give us a zone entry, that is what could keep us recycled for the week. Okay, so that's what could make these areas like in play, maybe recycled, maybe pinned back at high 70, 58, whatever. So those are likely the three scenarios, I think, and a lot of it's going to depend on what they do here. I think some of the things that are working in our favor are the fact that we at least tested 7088 and we did it on time. It's just the reduction sticks that we had occur here really reduced the range for the session. So, but even keeping it within these areas is not the worst case, especially if they keep it pinnable. So even keeping it in core ranges like above 6.4 in the 70s, basically where they opened, okay, these areas, like this is a pinnable session, which isn't the worst case scenario because at least it's pinnable and can still be linked to 7120s. Does that make sense? So honestly, I think it is going to be relative to what they do during this period of time here, because this could at least like 106. So far 106 held, but they still have yet to retrace 70, 71. What did you guys, can you guys vote please? Red, I would say, would have been maybe more probable if they didn't get this, if they didn't meet all these conditions, because you have to remember that they met every single one of these conditions, right? So market breaking down like this doesn't negate the fact that they did do this. You know what I mean? Like you can't just bypass the market's achievements based on one candlestick, I guess. But I think that kind of neutralizes things a little bit, and neutralizing it kind of keeps it within our ranges, like basically the channel means core ranges. Either way, I think the market did a pretty good job today in general, just based on the conditions that we have. Also, the 17-point reductions came into play again today too, beneath 8.8, 8.9. And the ranges from the report are set over a basis of 2 days. What was the condition for the 16th? And this is one of the reasons why I said earlier then we could have definitely hit some max range. So this is valid, only valid if we can actually sustain the 70-50s, okay, specifically 70-55, 70-58, personally speaking, and retrace 70-71 first, then 70-78, 70-81. Okay, Alexis, so it could be a shakeout, but to have a proper shakeout doesn't mean that you can go all the way back down. That's not how it works. You still have to have some sort of calculated form. And look at what they're doing here ahead of 115 and 116. Do you see what I'm saying? And they're coming back beneath that 70-66, which is, I think, opening up the window for this 70-50 scenario that we talked about. That was the scenario that I felt had the highest odds based on how price traded, but again, I could be wrong. I'm not always right on how I look at things, but that to me seemed like the higher case scenario for how they could end up trading this session today. No, that's not true. They have this box here that we talked about, 58, 57, 59. This would be the more ideal area to hold, especially for 115, because 115 is mid-session. And these areas are really calculated to the previous day's open, close, and highs, and obviously they were yesterday's open, close ratios, so. Okay, I think I'm gonna end the stream, guys. To me, it seems like that scenario is likely what's gonna play out. Look to see if they can hold the 50s here and ideally try to digest, but to me it seems like they might make this pinnable. If you have any short positions still remaining off this area here, I would manage that based on how price reacts if they get this back down to like 70.51 and lower. But there are some odds that they could hold the 70.55 to 58 area too. And like I said, holding the 70.55, 58 area, you'd have to retrace 70, 71, like at a minimum, which is core and opening range. And you'd probably want to do that by like 126, 130 period. Like you probably don't want to wait too long to get back above there. Does that make sense? That holding, I agree, could give some odds for end of day retest, but because the 50s are still correlated to our spots, but sustainment becomes very, very, very important at that point in time. Okay. If I feel like it's necessary to stream end of session, I will, but for now, I don't think it's necessary, so I hope you guys at least caught the nice long trade, maybe did a short off the 70.88 targets.